Welcome to the Be Nice podcast and continuing the conversation to bust myths and reduce the stigma when it comes to mental health, mental illness, suicide prevention. Remember, we're going to be talking about the Be Nice action plan, which are 4 simple steps: to notice, to invite, to challenge, and to empower. These 4 steps can change lives, improve, and ultimately save lives. Today's guest on our podcast is a co-worker of mine, Rachael Walling. Say hi, Rach.
Hi.
All right, excellent. But I want to do a little bit of housekeeping and a reminder. Please don't forget to follow and subscribe to our podcast. And then in addition, become a social media partner. Like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram. We've got a lot of information to share with you every week with Be Nice. As we're moving into our podcast, we have decided that we are going to really stick to a theme every week, and we did last week also. It's going to be busting myths. So today's mental health myth that we're going to bust: feeling anger is just a normal part of a teenager and has nothing to do with depression. Let's explore why this is not true. We know that anger, particularly excessive irritability, frequent anger outbursts can be a significant sign of depression in young people, and then in addition, also in adults, especially seen amongst young men and older men. We need to be aware that this potentially could be one of the first signs of somebody struggling with a mental health challenge, which then in addition could lead to a mental health disorder. Things to watch for: irritability that may not be typical of that person, frequent temper tantrums, easily frustrated by small things, aggressive behavior towards others and themselves, and then also sudden mood swings. So, what do you notice in these things? Remember, the number one reason people do not seek help and treatment is because of the stigma. Having open conversations regarding seeing and noticing anger might indeed bring us to a point to help someone. So we're going to move into our conversation with Rachael. And again, Rachael Walling is part of the Mental Health Foundation of West Michigan. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Rachael?
So I came to Be Nice from struggling in college. So I went to Hope College, and throughout my time there, I played soccer, studied in some sciences and psychology and neuroscience myself, due to the fact that I really started to see some of those changes in my mental health early on in my time there. And one of them being exactly what you just talked about, that anger. And for a long time, I grew up understanding depression to be more of sadness, right? Frequent crying, maybe some of that isolation as well, but really didn't tie anger into that. And it wasn't until I experienced that and realized that that was my main symptom in my depression, was this irritability, this, everything kind of made me angry. If I wasn't succeeding at the very, very top, then it was this failure and this kind of every little thing that really got to me. So that was kind of when I first started seeing some of those changes. And then as my time went on, struggled a little bit more with depression and anxiety that ultimately led to a crisis situation and a suicide attempt my junior year. And then through athletics, I did a little bit of outreach on that, and that is when you connected with me, and so I was able to connect with Be Nice and do some outreach, and eventually ended up working with you, and I'm loving every second of it.
And how we met, and we'll let our listeners know that, was I had read an article about Rachael receiving recognition at a huge award honoring a woman who had died, lost her life to cancer, actually. Mm-hmm. And the award was, what was it called?
It was the Karen Page Courage Award.
All right. So then I went on to read about the Courage Award, and that's where I learned of Rachael's story. While she was a student at Hope College, she did have a suicide attempt. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because I really want Rachael to share that story with you all. But I did make the call to Rachael and I said, "Hey, girl, what are you up to right now?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just working for a camp. I got a part-time gig." And then I said, "Would you want to come on board and help us go out into the community and teach this amazing action plan to students?" And she came on. We had a great 5-6 months, and then a position opened up, and we no doubt needed to ask and pulled Rachael on board, which that's what we love about the Mental Health Foundation and Be Nice. We definitely have team members who have journeyed through struggling at points in their life with mental health challenges and ultimately mental illness and mental health disorders. So, Rach, why don't you tell briefly your story of your time at Hope College and what happened and the positive outcome that came out of your story?
Yeah, absolutely. And always like to kind of brief my story in talking about suicide, just everyone keeping themselves safe, right? It's a hard topic for many people, but the more open, honest we can be about it, I think we can really make an impact. So always important to remember that. But yeah, so in the beginning of my journey at Hope, so I came from Granville High School and really flew through pretty easily. I was, a two-sport varsity athlete and had good grades, straight A's, was going into Hope really excited to continue my soccer career. And I was actually planning to be pre-med. So I kind of felt like I really knew what I was doing, what I was going to be, kind of all this confidence. And soon in that time, I really started to notice some of these changes that were happening in me. And although I couldn't identify them at the time, they were these changes in my mental health and seeing some of these symptoms of depression and anxiety that started to have a much bigger impact in my day-to-day life and really hindered me from being my best self there. So throughout freshman year and sophomore year, my mom was kind of one who really reached out to me to start along with one of my athletic trainers. And they just noticed some of these big changes in my personality and that anger. And, I was always tired. I was really exhausted from everything. And it was hard to really balance the idea of, well, is this just I'm young and I'm an athlete and I'm at school and there's a lot going on, or is this something more? And what I saw was that what felt like is everyone else could do this and I wasn't. And it was impacting that level of me to be able to do those daily activities, go to my classes, go to my workouts, be social in certain aspects. And so with such an impact in that is what really then sparked my mom to say, hey, I think you need to talk to someone. So it was in my freshman year, I started seeing a therapist. And I will totally admit that my beginning levels of treatment, I kind of just was going through the motions. I felt like, hey, I'm just doing the right things, right? And I wasn't really buying into maybe taking that with me and doing the extra coping skills that, my therapist was kind of showing me. I was like, well, I'm showing up to these things. I should start feeling better.
Was there anger there?
Absolutely. I think there was anger mixed with this feeling of failure, right? And feeling like, why is this treatment not working for me? And that's when even more, honestly, stigma kind of came into my own kind of thoughts of saying, well, maybe I'm failing at therapy. Maybe it's not right for me. Maybe I am just lazy. Maybe I am the problem, right? And that there's kind of more going on there. So I think that kind of anger and this fear of failure mixed with feelings of failure and what's supposed to be helping me really continued to kind of push worse feelings, right? And kind of set me in a position of, now I'm lying to people about how this treatment's helping me. And I ended up getting on medications in the summer. My therapist suggested that. So I was able to get in with a doctor. But even that, my medications had a lot of side effects. And what I wasn't aware of was I was kind of doing the people pleaser or putting forth this, oh yeah, now I'm really doing the right steps. I was in therapy. I'm now still in therapy and on medications. Things have got to get better. And they weren't. But I didn't express that. And what I know now, right, is that medications are tricky. And we have a lot of trial and error that goes with those. And I wasn't honest with my doctor to say, hey, I don't think this is the right thing. I just said, oh, yeah, no, it's fine. It's going fine, right? When really I was struggling, to get out of bed still. And sometimes when I took my meds, the side effects were so bad, I couldn't complete my school day, right? If I had a big test and I knew, hey, these meds might make me really sleepy, I can't take them that day. So now I'm not taking my meds consistently, right? And we know also in our studies, these have got to be taken consistently or it can affect you even worse. Yeah, how
frustrating.
So it was just this feeling of I'm not doing things right, but I feel like I am, and I'm failing at this and I'm failing at that. And that's when my grades start to slip. And I'm not doing as well in soccer as I want to be. And all these little things that really started to crumble. And I faked it for as long as I could. I kind of squeaked out my sophomore year. And then junior year came around and I ended up with an emergency surgery right before exams after my fall semester. And so now I'm in this space of recovery from my surgery, and I'm slowed down enough that I kind of have to deal with all these emotions that I've pushed down. And now I can't really lie to anyone because I'm way behind. I'm behind on my homework. I'm behind on exams. It's kind of all bubbling to the surface. And so I spoke with my mom and still tried to gain any control that I could. And so my hope was that I could just take a little bit more of a break, right? Just if I can get a little more break, I could catch up, was kind of always this feeling I was reaching for. So in spring semester, I ended up pulling back. So I went part-time. The hardest thing about that was that I'm not eligible for soccer then. So this huge protective factor, right? I do have to give up to try and catch up a little bit. And it was a really hard decision, but we went forward with it. So I was part-time. I was only taking a couple classes after Christmas break. And unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. So I was at school, and we were only a few weeks into the semester, and I had a horrible week. I was in my room. I didn't leave for class. I didn't leave for the dining hall. And I had friends texting me, hey, what are you up to? Do you want to go to the hockey game tonight? Haven't seen you in the dining hall. Are things okay? Many of my friends knew I struggled with depression, so I knew they were checking in and trying, but it was so much easier to lie than to even try and understand what I now know is really scary feelings of suicide, right? And what I understand is I had a lot of feelings of passive suicide for a long time without understanding the severity of that. And so that passive suicidal feelings of it would be easier to be done. And I even sat in front of my mom and said, yeah, sometimes it feels like it could be better to just not be here anymore. It'd be nice to just be done. But I would never do that, right? And I really believed that. I would never hurt myself. I would never do something like that. But it took this one really bad week for my mental health to get to a place that one night I attempted to just get out of my room. I went for a drive, and I ended up in the parking lot in front of the soccer stadium. And I sat there, and I felt like I dug myself into such a hole. I had lied to people. I was behind on everything. No break was going to be enough. And that's really kind of what broke me at that point, was nothing was ever going to be enough for me to continue on. It really felt like that light at the end of the tunnel was gone. So I had some pills with me, and I took a handful. I realized fairly quickly kind of the severity of maybe what had just happened. And there was actually, the basketball team was driving in from an away game on their bus, and I saw them drive in, and I realized what it meant to be on that bus. I remembered, right, I have this protective factor. I have these people there for me. And so I called 911, and the ambulance came out, and campus safety came out, and I remember being embarrassed and feeling like, gosh, this is not who I am supposed to be, right? I was this confident and knew who I was and knew who I wanted to be kind of person, but there I was in the back of an ambulance, right, for a suicide attempt. And I'm so thankful that a protective factor like that was able to save me in that moment. But I still had to deal with the fact that that's the point I'm at. That's where my mental health is at. And although I could have promised that to my mom all this time, I still ended up in this crisis situation, because even those passive suicidal thoughts are so important to take seriously. So I went to the hospital, and I ended up in an outpatient treatment with Pine Rest for a week, and really just took the full semester off that time and took some time for my mental health, and luckily was able to get into some really good treatment and take it seriously. And I found the right medication, right? And it wasn't easy. It's a hard process, and it takes work, especially when your mental health has gotten to that point, right? The earlier the treatment, if I could have taken that seriously, that's probably my biggest regret, is not taking that seriously and knowing how honest I needed to be in that time, that I probably could have taken care of myself a lot quicker. But now I'm in a space where I have to take this full break, and I've got to really give myself the space to get back to who I am. And I was able to do that. I was able to come back my senior year. I was able to play soccer and have a great fall season. We made Hope Soccer history and went to the Sweet 16. It was wonderful. And although I still struggle, right, it's not a perfect linear path as much as I wanted it to be. There are still days, even now, that can be hard. But I like to think that my vulnerability and honesty of saying, hey, I know when I do need to take a break. I know when I need to let my boss know, right? Hey, I'm going to be in a little bit late today. I need just a couple more minutes this morning.
Right.
And that grace and that vulnerability really leads to then having protective factors all around me so that I'm not ending up in a space where I'm not safe anymore.
Thank God that bus drove up.
I know.
Because we know oftentimes what we've heard from people who have attempted, and especially Kevin Hines, who has an amazing story of jumping off the San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge, and surviving, right? And as he was in the midst of that fall, he thought, I don't want to die. What did I just do? And so oftentimes he was spared, he himself, right? And so he tells that story, and I appreciate that you're able to share that story. And oftentimes people don't have that situation.
Yeah.
So, we love the action plan. I know you do as much as I do.
Yes.
And that challenge piece of the action plan being that piece of ask the question.
Yeah.
Were people asking you and checking in? And I know that you're passionate about that lesson when we teach it.
Yeah. I was not asked the question directly, right? I was not asked if I'm thinking of hurting myself. Even, definitely not asked, are you thinking of suicide? But not even, I love the question, are you feeling safe? That's one of the versions of that I am really passionate about, because I think, like I said, I didn't even fully understand I was feeling suicidal, right? That passive suicidal, I didn't take to be like, oh no, that's a suicidal feeling. It was just like there. And so I think what I could have recognized was I'm probably not feeling safe, right?
Yeah.
I'm really out of control of my emotions, and it's to this point that it's affecting me where I can't even get out of bed and these types of things. So not necessarily asked that question directly. My friends were checking in probably a way that, and no fault to anyone, right? Of just this way of, okay, this is weird, but I don't want to overstep, but I don't want to, I don't know exactly what to say, and, all of that kind of stuff. So I do think, knowing and having people have the confidence to say, okay, I haven't seen Rachael in a week. She's isolating herself in that room. I am really worried. Something in my gut, right? And I know that I'm sure some of my friends were like, yeah, I didn't feel good about it. But not necessarily knowing those steps and knowing how to have that conversation. And that's to no fault of them. And so I think the more we can empower and help people learn that we can ask that question. And it is hard. And guess what? You don't have to have the perfect answer if they say yes, right? When someone says, oh my gosh, yeah, I am. That's where okay, now I can just get you to this resource. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. And understanding too with that suicide, it's a scary feeling, right? It's sometimes when we talk about it, we talk around people who are maybe feeling that way, right? Make sure you can notice this in others. Make sure you can notice this in a friend, which is so important. Make sure you can notice it in yourself.
Right.
Right? And recognize that, hey, I am not feeling okay. I'm feeling a little scared of how these feelings are manifesting. And I think that's always a good reminder too, is it's a scary place to be. Self-awareness
is absolutely huge. And I know I did a training yesterday, as a matter of fact, and one question after we presented about the challenge yourself to ask the question, and immediately someone said back, well, what if the person's lying to you? And I reiterated to that person, don't ask it once, ask it twice. And if that person says, no, I'm not, repeat back to them that you said no, but I have seen these and I've heard this, right? The reminder now from both of us, I know that you're passionate about it, is to make sure that we give the resource. And that, hey, you know what, though? If you ever do feel that way.
We're going to call 988 together. We're going to text 741-741. And that idea of like, let's do it together.
Yes,
right. This isn't something you have to do by yourself. This isn't, and even if you're, it is kind of an awkward situation. It's a hard question to ask. I mean, I've had these conversations with my friends since, and I even still feel a little like, oh gosh, okay, I got to ask that question, But when you do, you can navigate that so much more easily. And really hearing, okay, I don't know if I'm really feeling that, but I am kind of starting to feel hopeless, right? There are pieces of that's coming out. It's like, okay, then let's take this next step, right? And we obviously talk to a lot of young people, and we talk about finding that safe adult. And I had the epiphany one time when I was talking to one of my friends. I was like, I don't know who my safe adult is, right? Like, now we're adults, and who is that? And so making sure you can even ask that person, who's your safe person? Who is someone that we can lean to? And then if not, like, we've got these national numbers. We've got a 741 who is this trained counselor, right, that can really talk us through this whole thing. Same with 988. So I think both of those resources are so, so important. Having your phone, having luckily we memorize them because we teach them all the time. But if you are not one of those people, put it in your phone, right? Make sure it's right there.
And we are partnering with 741. And for us, when we push it, we're pushing out the action plan in our program. We want folks to text actually NICE.
Yes.
And we're gathering some incredible data back right now of people who have utilized that form of communicating with someone when they're in a crisis.
Yeah.
And I know you're collecting that data, and you might as well just mention one piece about the data, not making it too much data.
I know. I love my data. But no, I think one of the most interesting things I saw about it is that self-harm is actually one of the top topics that's being reached out. So I think it's also important to remember these numbers are not just for suicidal crisis feelings, right? Anytime we're feeling unsafe or unsure of our mental health and I don't know who to talk to or how to talk about it, text the number, right? Text NICE. And there's lots of topics that get covered, and knowing that like self-harm is that crisis space too, if we're putting our body at that risk. So I always think that's an interesting one. And then also knowing that there has been some actual saves in our counties that have come from someone texting NICE to that number, and knowing that there's actual suicide de-escalation happening and lives being saved with that.
You got it. And our program, I'm really proud of it also because it's not only just sitting in Michigan. We are all over the place.
Yeah.
So if anyone is listening today, you can go to benice.org and look and search for more information online. We also, I'm really super proud of a project I had going on, and that was being part of writing a book. And today I actually talked to someone who had read the book, quoted something that I had written in the book, and it still rocks my world that I'm part of a book. But it's a great read, and that also is available on our website. And what he said is that he compares it to other programs out there right now who are suicide prevention tools. And he says, one thing I love about NICE, Notice, Invite, Challenge, Empower, is the fact that it is so simple and that everybody can do it. So, Rach, I just want to thank you so much. You're such an easy person to talk with about this. I had some questions to the side that I could have asked you, and you answered everything. And what it all goes back to is, we're so happy you are here. I'm so happy that you are part of my life and continuing the journey to help save, improve, and change lives. Thanks so much for listening to the Be Nice podcast today. And together, I think we busted another myth.
Absolutely.
Along with a lot of other myths also when it comes to suicide. Talking about it doesn't increase that number of people that might die by suicide. In fact, we need to talk about it. Rach, we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're going to keep at it. And if today's episode resonated to you, with you, share it with someone else that you might think may need it. And don't forget, again, 988 Crisis Suicide Prevention Hotline and 741-741. Until next time, be nice. It can save a life.
This podcast is made possible in part by the Kent County Medical Society Alliance.